Hi, good day, and welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about control flow, or you might actually hear me say a few times flow control. Don't worry, they use interchangeably whether I say control flow or flow control. Um, and specifically in this video, we're going to be talking about if statements. There are other things that other statements come under control flow or flow control, like while loop and so on. But today we're just gonna in this video talk about if statement. And before we get into that though, let's revisit the example from our previous video. And here, we're just looking. What I'm interested in is not really revisit what the problem did. It's just basically pointing out that so far all of our programs have seemed to start some line number and then end at some other line number. And it's just one straight thing, right? You start here, and even if when we had, like in this example, where we have a function definition here between lines 3 and 12, we're just saying these set of statements, 4 to 11 or whatever, are going to be given diff name foo, and when I use foo, you should really run those set of statements, right? But it's actually doing anything other than defining the function, right? And so, but our program is kind of from top to bottom, even once we keep going like that, right? And so our code is our program is pretty straight, right? Like start, execute statement after statement after statement, and then you get to the end and you terminate. That was it. That's all we've been doing so far. But what if we wanted to do something instead of just starting from one point and going straight down through all the statement and then ending? We want to do something like, I want to start maybe, and then based on what is going on, maybe prompt the user or test some condition, and then if that's true, I do a different set of statements and I ignore other set of statements, and if it's false, then I do a different path. So it looks like there is that you have a branch or a fork in your code, right? Because you have these set of statements that may get executed or may not get executed. And so that's things that happen a lot in your life, right? You get up in the morning and you go, well, if it's cold outside, I'm gonna wear a sweater, I wouldn't wear a sweater, or if it's raining, I'll get an umbrella, I wouldn't get an umbrella, right? So these are the things, if you weren't able to make those sort of decisions, you'd be pretty constrained. And so in programming, we'd be constrained if we couldn't do it. And so here's an example of how this might. And so basically, if you really want to think about it, is really what you're doing is just changing the flow. That's why it's called control flow or flow control. Controlling the flow of your program or changing the flow of it. And you can look at a simple example where it says, what if we say, based on the time when I run the program, I want to say whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or it's time to go to bed. And so this program has statements that may or may not all get executed based on what time it is. And so that's pseudocode, and pseudocode is basically like English kind of code. And you write something that's sort of between English and code, or whatever your language of choice is, but it's not quite code. It's not quite executable code. But pseudocode is often good to be able to start just writing down your ideas without thinking about the syntax of the code and being correct. And it's easy to talk to other people about and show somebody else, and then you could translate it to almost any programming language, because it's not quite any language per se, even though you could kind of write pseudocode closer to one language versus another. Anyway, so this is my definition of control flow. It's mechanism or a mechanism or several mechanisms, whatever, to alter or change the order in which statements are executed. And so some statement may be skipped and not get executed at all, like we see in the example before, when if it's not afternoon, that one wouldn't get executed. Some may get executed only once, and some may get executed multiple times. We can address the multiple times type of flow control in other videos. Okay, so let's take a look at the formal syntax of the if statement. So it looks like if some condition I want to test, and then a block of code that I want to execute. And block is just means multiple statements, really, and we'll see that. So don't get worried about a block. And if that first condition doesn't work, I can continue testing and say, else if another condition, another block of code, I can keep going and have as many else if as I want. Keep in mind, only the ones you've meet a condition that's true, that's tested true, it stops. It doesn't check any other, right? So that's why it says, if this condition do this block of code, Else, if that one failed, try another one and keep going. If all those tests fail, just fall back and do the else. The other important thing here to mention is that your condition is an expression that is going to be evaluated to a Boolean value. Booleans are either true or false. Alright, so that's the only other important thing here. So one of the simplest uses of this statement is the case in which when you want to skip, optionally skip some statements, right? So for example, in this program, I have statement 1, I'm going to test a condition, and then if it's true, I'll do statement 2. If it's false, I just go on to statement 3. And that one is pretty easy to demonstrate with the formal definition that we saw before. So let's jump to a code example and look at that. In this code example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the current time, and I'm going to check if the seconds, if the seconds is an even number, right? Because that happens often enough that you can kind of run it and see it and run it and see it again, instead of like, you know, something like morning, saying morning and good afternoon. You just have to wait too long for that. With seconds, that event occurs often enough that we can kind of read the second, see is it an odd number or even number. And that's all there is to it. And if it's even, I print out something. If it's not even, I don't print out. Look at an example where you do skip. But here's where you're going to reach a part in your code and you want to take one path or the other, not just simply skip something. And so here we're going to say if the condition is true, I'm going to take path, you know, statement 2, for example. If it's false, I'll go statement 3, and then after that, I'll continue my program. So let's go look at the example for that. And here, all I did was I take the first example and I add now to it the else statement, because remember, if I do a test and something is true, like in this case for even, if it's true, I do that, else it must be odd, so I print that number out. And again, this is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to explain it. If for any reason some of this doesn't make any sense for you, do ping me on the chat with comments. The final use case here is just extending on the previous case, and here we imagine that you have multiple things you want to test. You know, if you want to calculate the bonus for someone, you might say if the person, you know, how much money they made or how much sale attributed to them is, you know, above 90% of their target, then give them one bonus. If it's above 80, then give them another bonus. If it's above 70, give them another bonus. If about 80, you keep coming down until you're able to find, you know, what is it that it's true or what the condition that you'd like to meet. And so here I just contrive a simple example again using seconds, and I want to check and see if the last digit of the time is the number 2, 5, or 9. And I do that by getting the seconds as the time as a string. The reason why is because if I get the second as an integer as we were doing before, and when we were checking to see if it's even or odd, what could happen is if the second is a single digit, like the second's 3 seconds, then you just have one digit. So by getting it as a string, prevent that. Okay, so let's conclude. So what we've seen is that flow control or control flow gives you, the programmer, the ability to write more sophisticated and elegant program. You haven't seen much of the elegance really, but certainly, hopefully you can see that you can possibly make you write more sophisticated program. And the if statement is, you're going to see one of the most used flow control or control flow statements, all right? And basically that allows you to choose which things get executed and which one doesn't, and so on. All right, so I hope you find this informative and keep practicing and take care. Thanks. Bye.